everyone, now we move into the most important, the last part of this unit, that is remote sensing satellites. Okay, we need to equip ourselves, so we send these satellites, these remote sensors. These satellites, as you see, there's a picture of a remote sensing satellite in the center. These have sensors. Okay, so these are sent into space. These have sensors which will capture the electromagnetic waves or radiations. All right, this will reflect back and bring in the data from the earth, and this can give us a lot of information. Say it can tell us about the natural resources. That is how our ISRO started the series IRS series. Okay, this had 1A, 2A and so on and on. All these gave, and it started, the first one that came to India, from India, what the first remote sensing satellite was in 1988, and it was sent by ISRO. That was IRS-1A. Now we have many. Okay, similarly there is also this National Remote Sensing Center. This is in Hyderabad. Now these people have planned to send at least 30 satellites. Okay, in 10 years time they want to send 30 satellites, which means in 1 year it would be 2 or 3. Okay, so that is how they are planning to. Now this IRS, and all this is about the resources of the earth, including mines, including forests, including fuel, whatever may be the resources. Now all that will be captured by this, and it would give us a clear-cut image. Now for more about this, let us go into the topic. Is this remote sensing satellite a good tool? So we are here to prove that it is a good tool. Let us see how it works as a good tool. Okay. Now when you come to this, you can see that data coverage. Okay. Now we won't be able to move from one part of the earth to the other part of the earth, but the data that this covers is amazing. Okay, it can just cover whatever we need, maybe a weather forecast, maybe a tsunami coming, or about the floods, about the drought, whatever needed information we can always get. So it has a wide data coverage. The next one is homogeneity. As you see here, that means there is a consistent information. It is not like, can we trust, can we believe this, will it change? It is never like that. The information that we get from remote sensing satellites, from these sensors, is consistent. Okay, and it is steady. The next one is computer processing. As we all know, we are in the computer world today, that the work that was done by 10 people can be done by just 2 people or just even 1 person. So the computer is there to process everything in no time. Then comes low cost. Of course, the satellite costs a bomb. Okay, but then the satellite is borne, the expense of the satellite is borne by the government, and later on whatever data we collect and whatever data we are able to pass on is all having a very minimal cost. Okay, so there is very less cost that is involved, and then of course we have less time. It's very quick. So in the quickest possible, see, if you have a geostationary satellite that can go around and give you an information once in every half an hour, can we do it manually? It is not possible. Okay, so it takes very less time. Then there is also frequency of data. These two are of course the same almost. Okay, you can get, see, supposing you want a weather forecast, every 1 hour or every 15 minutes, still it is available with a remote sensing satellite. Okay, so these are the things that prove that it is a good tool. Now let's go on to the applications of the remote sensing satellite. Now we move on to the applications of remote sensing satellites. The first thing, let us take desertification. These satellites have given us an information or an assessment that nearly 3.5 billion hectares, can you imagine the amount of land, are prone to become deserts. Okay, this can become desert. Which means they are not cultivable, it's not conducive, the temperature is not conducive, and it's going waste. Okay, so that desertification comes through remote sensing satellites. Then the most important thing is ozone depletion. Ozone depletion, it gives the latest idea or assessment about the ozone levels in Antarctic region, and because of that the ozone hole has formed. Okay, and why is it due to, what is it due to? It is due to chlorofluorocarbons, and this is in short called as CFCs. Okay, this is what we use in air conditioners and refrigerators, and so these are the main compounds, main reason for forming the ozone hole, and this also is continuously, periodically assessed by the remote sensing satellites. Then we have mining. When we talk about mines, we have absolutely no clue. Mines you can never find out, but through these satellites we are able to find out. It gives a picture of active mines and also abandoned mines. And abandoned mines are the places where there can be pockets of lot of waterlogging there, and you can have coal and other things if it's a coal mine, and because of that methane gas could be emitted, and so many other dangers can be there due to abandoned mines. Then it also gives you an idea of the floods and drought. When you come to floods, now so many people are evacuated even before the rain falls on that particular area, because they know that the weather forecast tells us that there is going to be a severe storm, or there is going to be a hurricane, there is going to be a tornado, whatever it is, and they even are able to predict the speed of the wind, and 100% or 99% it turns out to be correct, and this is all due to the remote sensing satellites. So people are safe because of this, and they are saved, and a lot of havoc is prevented because of remote sensing satellites. This gives us an idea of the drought conditions also. Then we have the weather forecast. Of course, these three are almost the same. So we know whether there's going to be a heavy rainfall, so we know we can be mentally prepared, we can be physically prepared, so we can avoid so many things because of remote sensing satellites. So these are the major applications of remote sensing satellites. And the last one, but not the least, it gives us the latest assessment of all the resources that are available. For example, let us take the forest cover. If we take the forest cover, we know how many hectares of land is filled with forest and what are the dangers there, and we also can find out some of the forest fires and the damages that are caused. Okay, sometimes how the forest cover has improved, that also comes to light through the remote sensing satellites. Okay, now we move on to the last part of this unit, that is international norms on air pollution. Okay, according to the National Auto Fuel Policy. This was mainly for the emissions, to have a control and monitor over the emissions. This was brought across in 2010. Okay, so what they did was, they brought in something like Euro 1, 2, then came 3, then came 4 and so on. Now we have, what we have now is Euro 6. We have come up to that. What does this basically mean? That these engines are, whatever they emit is monitored. Okay, so they are slowly bringing down the hydrocarbon emissions and carbon monoxide emissions, mainly carbon monoxide. These are slowly reduced. So, for example, if you take Euro 1, this had about 3.5% carbon monoxide it could emit. They were allowing, the permissible range was 3.5%. Now, Euro 2 has come down to 2.5% of carbon monoxide emission. So slowly they are cutting down. So what happens, the manufacturer has a great challenge in front of him, that he has to design the engine in such a way that the emissions of these poisonous gases, dangerous gases, are brought down. The basic thing about this is, in India it comes as Bharat stage. Okay, now we have Bharat stage 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. Okay, so we call that as BS 1, 2, etc. Okay, now the idea behind this is, by 2050 we should not have any emissions and the engine must have zero emissions. This is our ambition. So as future environmentalists, I would just give you this challenge, that you would come forth with designing very beautiful engines. Of course, they should be good, they should look good, but at the same time, they must also have zero emissions. Now, when you come to this Euro 6, what happens there is, they have reduced the sulfur dioxide, sulfur emissions to a very great extent. Okay, Euro 6. Now, this Euro 4 has been banned by the Supreme Court. Even during the, actually if you see this date, it's in the lockdown period. The whole world was reeling in the lockdown period, but still it has banned the usage of Euro 4. Okay, now coming to this, there are some disadvantages also. The thing is, this is not for the whole world. It does not cover the whole world. Okay, so when you get a vehicle from any part of other than India, then there is a problem with this. Not only that, this is not suitable for Indian vehicles. That is why we started off with something called Bharat stage. Just like this Euro 1, 2, 3, we have Bharat stage, that is BS, and it has 1, 2, 3, etc. Now when you come to this, there is also Bharat 6 right now, which has reduced the emissions of sulfur or oxides of sulfur, and it has also reduced oxides of nitrogen by 25%. This is the latest one. Okay, so this is bringing down, and it's highly suitable for our Indian vehicles, and whatever norms are placed is according to the Indian conditions and the thing. And the main basic thing, the last one is, what they are finding out is, in Euro 7, which by 2050 will have zero emission of greenhouse gases. And you know greenhouse gases, these are basically carbon dioxide, then you have methane, then you have oxides of nitrogen and sulfur. This results in something called global warming, which is posing a great hazard, and this is the reason for our tsunamis and floods. So all this is brought down, that's their aim, they are aiming at this by 2050. And you as environmentalists, I challenge you to come out with good manufacturing and good engines and technology that would bring down everything to zero emissions. Get going.